Welcome to episode 16, Construction Nation. This is Sue Dyer, your host of Construction Dream Team, where I interview industry leaders and experts so you can learn about the people side of construction. Then you can build your construction dream team based on OPE, other people's experiences. The shortest way to success is to learn from others who've been there and done that. I hope you'll head on over to iTunes and give Construction Dream Team a 5-star rating. If you click on the purple podcast icon on your iPhone and search for Construction Dream Team, it'll come up. Scroll down a little bit and you'll see ratings and reviews. And if you hit the 5th star, the one on the farthest to the right, you've given us a 5-star rating. We just appreciate it so much because it allows us to get up higher in the search engines so more of Construction Nation can find us. And if you're listening, I hope you'll write us a review. The reviews are really important to us also. And you can also make comments at constructiondreamteam.com right on the episode and tell us what you think or any other questions that you might have. Okay, we are going to dive into this episode. I am so proud and privileged to have our guest today. I have known this person for about 3 decades, so that's a long time. Most projects today, go along, but we're seeing more and more projects that have a desire or need to be very fast, like really fast, condensing the time frames that might take otherwise a year or two into a few weeks. And there are many reasons why we accelerate projects like this, but Terry Tuggey has led several of these very fast-paced projects, and they have been very successful. So I've asked him to come here today and share with us some of his insights, lessons learned, and maybe some of the secrets he has seen that really has made these projects successful. A little bit about Terry. He is the area manager for Granite Rock. As I said, I met him first about 2 or 3 decades ago on a highway project we were working on together. And since then, we've worked on several projects, and some of them have been the very accelerated type of project. So let us dive in and welcome Terry to Construction Dream Team. We're so glad you're here. So I know that you've been out and about doing this for quite a long time now, and I know that you've learned a lot. But can you tell us a little bit about your journey? What has brought you to being the area manager at Granite Rock? Maybe a little bit more about Granite Rock?
Sure. So let me start out with me first, which I hate talking about the most, but that's the first question, so I'll answer it. I came out to California in 1994. Before that, I resided in Massachusetts, and I worked for a small construction firm back there. Right out of college, I went to school and graduated with a communications degree, among other things. So I guess I could say I talked my way into a job in construction. So I worked on the East Coast until 1994, managing many projects. I started out as a surveyor hand. That's where I got my feet wet in construction. Learned a lot about the business construction side by being in the field doing layout and survey work. That was an interesting way to start. It was actually a great way to start. The role of a surveyor assistant is to hold what we used to call the dummy end of the tape, or the rod for the grade elevations and stuff. So you got to do a lot of observing and not a lot of thinking. Eventually, I became a foreman at that company and worked my way up to actually vice president of concrete before I moved out west. I journeyed out west and I met Granite Rock actually before I made the transition and interviewed over the phone. And when I came out west, I finally met in person with Bruce Wolpert, the former owner, who has since passed away, and offered me a job in construction. So my very first project in construction was I think it was the second one was with you, Sue, on that Highway 84. Your memory's better than mine, because I was trying to think of when we met, and I was glad that you answered it first because I wouldn't have remembered it was that far back. But yes, that was one of my second job. And in 94, I was sent out to the SFO airport to work on a project. And my orders were, we had a lot of problems working at SFO. The history of our company, the material side and the airport had a lot of problems. So Bruce challenged me to go figure it out. And now it'll be 25 years in July at SFO. So I think I figured it out because I'm still there. A little bit about Granite Rock. Granite Rock in 1922 split and became Granite Rock as a materials division only, and Granite Construction was the other side of the company that was sold off. So there's some history back to 1922. We were in construction. From 1922 to 1989, there was not a construction division within Granite Rock. Bruce Wolpert decided in 89 to open up a construction division again called Pavex Construction. The goal of that division was to push materials through the construction side, the asphalt, the concrete, and as much as product as we could out of the quarry. In 1994, I started, and kind of the rest is history. So I got onto Granite Rock Construction called Pavex really early. We were really small, and we've now since grown. And now the construction division is almost as equally as large as our materials division, which is good for the company. So that's kind of where Granite Rock and I have evolved. Some of the projects we'll be talking about today are a Golden Gate construction joint venture projects that have been highly paced and fast paced, as well as some of the Granite Rock projects we've done in the past.
Perfect. And I know that Granite Rock also, I don't remember what the date was. It probably was in the 90s, was a Malcolm Baldrige Quality Award winning company, which was in construction kind of unheard of.
Yeah, that was in 1992.
Okay. Yeah. So very astute leadership there for many, many decades. So thinking about you as a leader, you've evolved and you've become, a very strong leader, I believe. What do you think are your greatest strengths as a leader?
So one of the things that I think that I value more than anything else is caring about the people you work with. That's something that was passed down to me from Bruce. There's a business side to life, and then there's a family side to life. And if one outshadows the other, it can become complicated. So I pretty much stress a good balance between work and life. I think a healthy life leads to a healthy work and vice versa. So one of the things I'm always perceptive to do is make sure I care about the people. When you go into an office environment or even on a job site, there's a lot of stuff going on in people's lives before they get there. And there's a lot of stuff that goes on in people's lives when they leave. And sometimes we make the mistake of jumping right into work and just not asking the simple question like, how is your family? Or how is your weekend? Or how is your day or your night? And I think that's an important quality in a leader. Not only does it demonstrate you care, it demonstrates that there's an interest in the person besides just what they can give you in the company. So that's one of the things that's probably my greatest strength. I think if you were to ask the people that work with me, they would probably say the same thing. So that's what I value the most.
It's interesting because I always tell people that you can't fake caring. People know when you really care or you don't. And when people care, when you care about people, they care about you and they care about doing a good job. So thank you for that. So let's talk a little bit about leading projects that are very fast paced. What can you tell us about these types of projects and how you approach them? And what's different and maybe what's the same would be very interesting.
So the first thing I think that you have to realize is when it is a fast-paced project, sometimes the pace and the duration of the project on paper can be overwhelming. And it's okay. I don't think anyone should. I think that if you had our Golden Gate construction team together for the job that we did at SFO a couple of years back, if you said every one of us thought there was doubt or thought there was no doubt, I think we'd all be lying. I mean, it's okay. It's perfectly acceptable, even as a leader, to say, wow, I don't know if we can do this. And I know that maybe not what some people want to hear from a leader, but it's just reality. So you have to be realistic. And then from there, after you digest it for a little bit, I think one of the best things to do is to divide it into pieces. And what I mean by that is take certain segments of the project and build them in a small piece and then try to assemble them all together in a master schedule. If you think of how an automobile is built, there's an engine department, there's an interior department, there's probably a glass division. All those things are working independently on the project, and then they all kind of come together at the end. So on a fast-paced project, when there's multiple pieces to the project, try to break the pieces apart as best you can and make some sense of it. And then look at which pieces have the most obstacles or the biggest challenge, and maybe focus on that section a little bit more as a leader, or help that team better. Because there's always something on a project that's going to be your critical element. There's always something. And most of the time it's what you're least comfortable with, which is really a challenge, because now you try to go into your least comfort zone to help out. And that's hard to do. The other part that I would like to add on there, sometimes you need to build the job in its entirety from start to finish multiple times on paper and planning before you start the work. And when I say that, it's because when you do that, you are probably going to find a hurdle that you didn't think about. And it's best to find that before than it is during. Now, I don't want to give the illusion that there's no obstacles or hurdles during construction, because that would be lying. But sometimes you can recognize them in the pre-planning process pretty well. And that allows you to try to avoid them later down the road.
Okay, so one question I have on that, just that part right there. What does that look like when you're doing the pre-planning in this stage?
Well, we like to call it the whiteboard.
Okay.
That's basically anything on a grease board. Put it all together in individual pieces, and no one's thoughts or crazy thoughts, just kind of outline it on a grease board. And then once you get that grease board kind of finalized of what you think the project's going to look like in a schedule, or the pieces and how the pieces fit together, then you can start to put it on paper and then really look at it. And sometimes that process could take up to 30 days on a major project. It could take less than that on a smaller project. You really can't set a definitive timeline, but you do have to set some type of deadline, because you can go on and on trying to build something the perfect way, but at some point you just got to get started. So,
and who's there with you?
Oh, the project team. Well, a project team like on the RSA job would have 2 project managers, one for each side, and a couple engineers and a couple general superintendents. And then, of course, your subcontractors' input is important as well. So you might have a room of 10 or 20 people in there for a couple weeks. Cool. And I know that may sound like a lot, but if you break it into pieces, maybe out of that 10 or 20, 3 are working on one piece, another 3 on another piece, another 3 on the other piece. Then you kind of bring them all back together and kind of merge it together. Like I said, building the pieces is the most critical part, and then merging them all together in sequencing.
Then you had a third thing. I interrupted you.
Well, that's it. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to make adjustments or to change. We've had projects where we've gone down the wrong road for too long, and then just have decided to flip a 180 and do something different. And that's okay, because that's basically what that is you're learning something that you started out one way, and you figured it out along the way that this isn't going to work. And so we've wasted some time. Yeah, but you know what? We learned the way that we learned before we started that it wouldn't work. So we're going to have to go back and start all over again. And don't follow a bad plan just because you have the plan. You need to change it and make adjustments as necessary.
Cool. And one other question that just popped in my mind too was on these large projects, you have a lot of people involved. I mean, hundreds of people involved. How do you deploy them in a way where it doesn't get confusing or chaotic?
So each party, and what I mean by each party, you have an owner, you have a general contractor, you have a design team, and you may have a construction management component. You have to break those people into certain groups and let them handle certain pieces. Like I said, I'm going to say the word pieces a lot because that's the most important part. You're going to take certain pieces of a project and then assign certain people to those pieces and not have everybody working on the whole thing. You won't get anywhere. So by doing so, that team is split up and they're assigned their pieces. We call them, I forgot, I guess we called them teams, special teams kind of people. And there was an electrical team, there's an underground team, there's a civil
Oh yeah,
grading teams.
we had fast teams.
Fast teams. Thank you. I
Yeah.
forgot. Fast teams. So those
Focused
teams have
action
different
strategic
individuals.
teams. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And so those teams are broken out and assigned roles. And so electrical team may never even know about the civil side ever. They may never get educated on that until the end of the job and it's all over. That's okay. They're on a team. They're doing their job. So that's how you take that large group of people and break it out.
So overall, when you think if someone is going to take on a project or they've been given a project where they have to take on this really fast pace, what do you think are the most important things that they should be doing when they're first starting to take this on and then maybe as it rolls out?
So the first thing is to get a set of common goals. I've been in meetings where the owner's idea of success and the contractor's idea of success are totally different. So that's good to get that out in the open in the beginning and try to figure out what the common goal is going to be. Because you may think on a fast-paced project, the goal is time. That's what I would think. My gut would tell me it's time. But some owner might come in and say, you know what? The timeline for me is not as important as the money. So that opens up a different conversation. So I think it's important to set a common goal, an achievable common goal, and let that be something that's understood by all the parties, not just the two people meeting in a room deciding for themselves. The whole team needs to buy into that goal. And the other thing that pops to mind is communication is key in everything. Communication in life is key to everything. So if you can't communicate, you're not going to have any success. So you have to have open lines of communication. The other thing that's important is to elevate quickly. If you work on a problem too long and delay people, you didn't elevate fast enough. It just means that you couldn't get to the answer you need as quick as you want. And we strive with our organization. It's okay to elevate. There is nothing wrong with saying, I surrender. I throw up my hands. I cannot solve this. And if you work for an organization that punishes you for that, you might want to consider working for a different organization, because we promote that within Granite Rock and within Golden Gate. It's okay to say, I don't know, because we all don't know. There's times where I'll stumble over the simplest problem. And if you elevate it, someone will have the answer in less than 30 seconds. And you go, wow, I wasn't even looking at it that way. So elevating issues quickly is really good. It's good for both sides of construction, the owner's side and the construction side, because what it does is it moves things along quicker. And that's the most important part of the fast-paced project. You have to keep moving. If you stop, any stop at all is a loss of momentum, is disastrous.
You were talking about how important communication is. I know that you guys were co-located. So how were you set up in the co-location, and how did communication happen while you were co-located?
So you have to picture a set of four sets of trailers that are 12 by 60 foot built together to be one big office for the construction team. And that's built right on the back side of a building that houses the owners group and the construction management team and the designers. So I think at one time, Stu, we had maybe 100 people in those buildings, those two buildings combined. And so what that allowed us to do, and it really wasn't something that was really thought out at all. It just kind of happened. I mean, if you look back on that job, that was one of the biggest things that we did right that we didn't even try. It just kind of happened that we decided to build our office right next to their office just because of location of the airport and the proximity to the job. It was really the only realistic way to put an office out there. So originally we were looking for office space 3-4 miles outside the job. And I'm glad that didn't work out, because by pure luck, putting this office right behind the owner's office created a great environment of, you saw everybody every day. And one of the things that we really, really started to learn how to do, which sounds so simple, and I know people might just laugh when they hear this, people learned how to talk to each other. And the emails started to slow down. And the correspondence was, hey, by the water bubble machine, I'm working on this issue. Can you come look at it in 5 minutes? Yeah, I'll be right over. And that happened between the construction division, the design team, the construction manager, and the airport staff. So the email train started to stop and people started to really talk. And things happened really fast once people started to talk. And then we talked about the fast teams. Those were set up with an equal number of parties from each one of those categories on a fast team. And they met every day, but they met in a meeting on their own and they talked. So the issue of the day was brought up and solved within an hour and moved on. And so I think that, like I said, the way that whole thing was developed was not strategically planned, but it happened and it worked. And it's probably a good model for other people to think about, because it's really amazing to see someone say words versus email them, and the difference in the meaning they can be interpreted so much differently when they're spoken versus seeing it in an email. So I think that to me was the one takeaway that I learned that we don't do enough of in the industry. Sue, as you know, I'm not a really high tech guy. I love when people talk. So that's really key to me.
So, just want to ask you your impression now that it's kind of a while since this project completed. What role do you think structured collaborative partnering played in this project?
It played a critical role. It's very important. And one of the first things you'll do in that collaboration partnerings is you're going to set the goals together as a team. And that's when you have that buy-in in a structured format, that makes it all the better, because there's no backing up at that point. That the goals are launched, the team is assembled, and they're working. So having that structure is necessary. I think sometimes people think they do it informally and they think it's okay, but it's really not doing it the right way. Structured is the way to go. I think informal partnering, when you're not around the structured partnering, is great, but at some point you need to have the structured partnering to really put it down on paper what's really going on. So that was really important. It also allows, every once in a while, there's a check-in, and it allows people to voice something that maybe they didn't know or understand, or someone brings something up in an email that's not been brought to the rest of the group. So the structured partnering is a great way to bring out that stuff. You don't bring baggage to partnering, but you do bring some issues that are bugging a certain team, and you need to talk about them. And what it also forces you to do, me being on the executive level, it forced me to really go dive deep into the team and say, what are the issues? Because I want to go to the partnering meeting, and I don't want to hear there's something that I didn't know about that you guys have it's been bugging you or you didn't want to bring up. So let's get in there. So it kind of forces you to go back and really focus with your team on how they feel and what's the pulse of the project, is what I guess I would say.
And I know that you've also looked at now what made that work, what was important to make it really happen and be successful. What have you learned not to do in comparison to other projects now? What have you learned that you would not want to do on a fast-paced project that maybe does happen on most other projects?
The beauty of a fast-paced project is there is a clock, and the non-beauty of a non-fast-paced project is time doesn't seem to be a constraint. And so what happens is people don't have a sense of urgency to get to a solution. They'll put it off till next Tuesday. I have to laugh. When I first started construction, I was up in Vermont. And I remember being on a job, and I was still a young kid. I was still in college at that time, and I was a flagger because I wanted to get a suntan. So, but I remember these jobs would go on and on and on. And I remember listening to the field supervisor at the end of the shift just saying, we'll get to that next week. And it seemed like it went on and on and on when I was younger. And I think that's because people don't like to handle the issue that's in front of them. They want to avoid that to the last possible minute. But on a fast-paced project, that hurdle or obstacle is gonna bite you bad. So I think what I would say is don't let momentum stop. That's the one thing that has to happen. And it's okay to make a mistake with the momentum. I mean, there's been times we have to do some rework because maybe we did something wrong, but at least you kept moving. and I'm not saying go out there and spin your wheels just for nothing, but you got to think about a way to keep the job moving toward its goal, even if that's a smaller side operation that wasn't planned to be done at that time, but can be done now. And so, like I said, going back to the momentum factor, you really just have to keep it moving. And that means everybody's got to chip in to do that. So if there's a solution or a problem that's not happening, people got to step up and just make it happen.
So it's really interesting, too, that on this fast-paced project that we're talking about, it was a joint venture. So some people would say a joint venture, especially on a horizontal type project, man, those don't work very well. How did you guys make that work?
So from the very beginning, when we assigned the team, each party picks their best people to put on a team. We stated that the name of the company is Golden Gate Constructors. And I think that's really, really key for a lot of reasons. A lot of joint ventures name the joint venture Party A/Party B a joint venture. And what that does is it kind of creates two identities for one team. So I think that that's just a wrong way of doing it. And I really do like what my two bosses at the time, I guess I call them two bosses, two different ownership groups decided to do was to create a name. And by creating a name, we created a team and we created its own company. And one of the very first meetings we had was we said, you're not going to be Party A and you're not going to be Party B. You're going to be Golden Gate Constructors. And we don't even know what that environment or that culture is going to look like, but you guys can make it what you want it to be. Now, you still have to stay within the parameters of all the ethics and all the right things that our companies do individually. But as far as how you structure yourself and run your operation and treat people and do things, that's going to be what you guys come up with. So that was really important to do that because it really set a tone that everybody in the office complex wasn't working for someone else's company. They were working for a new company, so to speak. And I think that's important. Like I said, if I see one thing on paper, sometimes I wonder why people do it. I think a Party A, Party B JV name is horrible. I think it creates two identities for one team project.
And you guys have done other jobs too now. So it actually ended up being a company more or less, right?
Yes, and it still is. So we've been moved on to many more projects, but they're all still called Golden Gate Constructors. We've actually rotated people in and out of the joint venture into that organization. And we pretty much give the same type of pep talk that you're not this company and you're not that company anymore. You're part of this. And it's worked really well. I'm actually pretty happy with it. I'm actually created some great friendships. I mean, if it's just bizarre to think that you can do that and just by the name, but I really think it's a powerful message.
It's probably the messages also that you guys are sending together because I just don't think this is a norm in the industry either. So I think there's a lot to be learned from effective joint venturing as well. So in your career, I'm sure not everything has always been hunky-dory wonderful. You've had some challenges along the way. So take us back to one of maybe the worst challenge you've ever faced in your career. Take us back to that moment and tell us about that.
So this it's kind of, well, let me try to phrase it. Losing Bruce Wolpert was a big blow to me personally and to our company. For those of you who don't know on this call, Bruce Wolpert was the owner of Granite Rock, who passed away suddenly in a boating accident. And that happened on a Sunday, and we got the phone calls on Sunday night. And a lot of people, including myself, didn't want to believe it because, first of all, we didn't know that Bruce was even a boater. So that was hard to take. And second of all, Bruce was a very strong, powerful, caring, loving individual that taught me a lot. So that was a major blow in my career. And maybe not the way you're thinking of like, what's the biggest challenge, but that was a challenge for me for quite a while. It still is to this day on and off because Bruce was a great sounding board, great listener, the best communicator I've ever met in my life. And so that was the biggest blow I've had in my career, to be honest with you. Losing someone you respect and work with on a daily basis that quickly is kind of a daunting task. And it's also a daunting task for an organization. When you take someone away from an organization that was so involved in their organization, such a great leader, in the industry and their organization away, there's a huge, huge professional and personal hole that's left there. And I'm glad to say that our company, with great leadership from our executive committee on up to the board of directors, figured out a way to fill the hole, not with just one person, but other people filling in. And we've been able to carry on and move forward and grow. So at one point, I used to think that maybe this was just a challenge, that Bruce was really not passed away. He was just trying to see what the company would do without him. I think I gave up on that thought many years ago now, because it looks like it's reality. So that's probably been the biggest challenge I've faced. Yeah. So I'm not sure, Stu, that answers the type of question about a career challenge, but that was a career challenge.
No, I think that's exactly right. And I always say that the true measure of a leader is what happens to their organization when they're not there anymore. Does it carry on?
Yep.
And that has happened. So he was a great leader. So what is the best advice you've ever gotten?
So when I was back in Massachusetts, I was working on it was by a $200 million shopping mall. We were doing the site grading and paving. And at that time, I was still the survey helper. And I remember going into to work one day, and the general superintendent of the whole job came over to my boss and myself and said, "Hey, I need you guys to go lay out, parking lot D, which is way on the other side of the mall where we were working." As a matter of fact, that whole area had not even been stripped of its dirt and stuff and trees. And I remember asking him why, because to me on the schedule, it was like a year away. And he said, "Well, guys, in construction, you always have to have a plan A, B, C, D, and even E." And I said, "Well, what does that mean?" He goes, "Well, I just moved in all these scrapers to work in this one area of the job that's on the schedule. But if there's a problem in that area, I've got nowhere to put all this equipment and manpower for 2 more weeks. So I need to create a plan B. So if something goes wrong in my plan A, I've got people to go and be productive. Because the last thing I want to do is, after spending all this money to have all this machinery delivered, is to turn around and tell someone to take it all away." So I didn't realize it at the time, Sue, that when I heard that advice, how much it meant to me overall in my career. And even now to this day, people in my office will say, I will always ask what plan B is and plan C and plan D is. Because plan A, you hope plan A always works, but it doesn't, and not in construction.
Mm-hmm.
So always having the backup plan of what you're going to do is the most critical thing you can do every day.
That's wise advice, because we can't even control the rain, can we? So,
No.
So I know Bruce Wolper was a mentor. Who else has been a mentor of yours along your career path?
So that gentleman I just talked about, his name was Dave Smith. I worked for him for 4 years on that shopping mall, and I learned a lot. He was a very, very good communicator. Lots of people came in and out of the job, as you can expect, over a 4-year period, but the messaging was always the same. So it didn't matter who came in. It was always kind of the same clear message of what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. So that was really important for me to learn when I was younger. As I got older, obviously Bruce, but there's been others. I mean, there's little bits and pieces you can pick up from most different people along the way. I even think that I've learned a lot in the last couple of years getting to know Jeff Newmeyer at SFO, picking up on some of his personal characteristics and traits with people and how he solves problems, and doesn't even call them problems. He doesn't call them issues. He calls them potential solutions. So even the wordsmithing that you learn changes things. So I think that those are probably the 3 top right there.
Perfect. So we always like to ask our guests to share a resource or something that's been meaningful to you that might be meaningful to Construction Nation. So what would you like to share?
So there's a book called It's Your Ship. We were handed out the book at a Granite Rock managers conference, and Bruce handed out this book for us to read it. And it's about, the commander's name is Michael. I'm going to try to pronounce his last name as best I can in case he's ever listening. Abrahoff. It's Abrashoff. Basically, this gentleman took over the worst performing ship in the Navy, crew included, and turned it around to be the best performing ship after a couple of years. And I don't want to ruin the book. I'll just tell you one piece of it so people can be interested in maybe going to pick it up. And I'm not getting any money from any of this. So don't
Well,
think that.
we'll
But
put a link to it in for Amazon in the show
yeah,
notes. Yeah.
yeah. So one of the messages he did right off the bat was on a ship like that, usually the officers eat first. So when you went down to the cafeteria, the officers would go through the food line, grab their food, and then they go sit somewhere by themselves. And so his first order of business on day one was the officers now eat last and they never sit together. They sit with the crew. So that's just an example of what he kind of thought to do to turn the ship around, because morale was bad. Performance was horrible. Safety was terrible. So basically he had all these obstacles and someone with great insight assigned him the ship. And so that's kind of the theme of the book, but there's a lot of great stories in that. That's not just the final end all story. So I encourage people to read it. All of our construction managers and all of our Granite Rock managers read the book, and it was a pretty powerful, and it's not a long read by any means, but it's got a pretty good messaging.
Sounds like it. Sounds sort of like familiar, doesn't it? So
Yeah.
what's your favorite piece of tech that you like to use? A tool or something
So
that you use?
early in the conversation, you said I'm not a tech guy. So, but there's one thing that I've used pretty successfully. It's a pretty simple, basic Microsoft project scheduler, and it's just a bar chart. It's nothing fancy. There's all these modern Primavera linked and integrated systems that you have to use, which are great for big projects and stuff. But just to get things organized, just from A to Z on a project, you can go in there pretty quick and set up a project and start to build the components of the project one line item at a time and link them together. It's pretty nifty and pretty quick. It's a great way to get things off of your mind and on paper for a project schedule. So this is probably after the grease board part, where you put it on a grease board and look at how you like it. You can throw it into this thing and get an idea how it looks, and you can move the pieces here and there. And then you can start to work on your more complicated owner accepted CPM schedule in a more sophisticated software. But Microsoft Project is pretty basic, simple, easy to use little system.
That makes a lot of sense, to take your grease board and then kind of memorialize it in something like this, where you can look at it, move it around. So how can Construction Nation get a hold of you if someone wanted to get a hold of you?
They can contact you.
They can. We'll make sure that they can get a hold of you. So, parting advice to Construction Nation, something that people could start doing tomorrow to try to think about, or maybe even make their own project more like a fast-paced, high-performing team. What would be your advice?
So many years ago, like in 1994, or a little bit after that, I was assigned 2 young project engineers. And we had multiple projects going on, and I had assigned them different things to work on, and we had all this stuff going on. When I say stuff, it's just construction stuff. And I went in one day, and one of the project engineers was literally in tears. And I said, "What's wrong?" And she said, "I've got so many things to do. I don't know where to get started, and I'm behind, and da da." I said, "Okay, stop right there." So I've had this technique for many years now. You make a list on a little piece of paper next to your desk every morning, and just list all the things you think you have to do. First of all, get them out of your head, because sometimes when you sit in a meeting and people make assignments, you're listening and you're writing what you have to do, but you're getting overwhelmed thinking about, wow, I got all these other things I'm supposed to do. And then all of a sudden your mind starts to shut down. So making a list really helps to get it out of your brain and onto paper. And then after you've made the list, you can just put a number next to each item. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Which ones are the most prioritized? Which ones can wait? And then here's the best part about it. At the end of the day, I hope you can scratch things off the list, because it makes you feel like you've gotten something done. And then hopefully your list gets smaller. Then it builds back up again, and then you got to get it smaller, and then it builds back up. It's a constant game, but getting that out on a piece of paper and writing it down is the best thing you can do. I am not a big fan of, like, even Microsoft Calendar now, seeing everything on that calendar that way. It messes me up. I still like to have my list, because I just know that I can look at the piece of paper on the desk, and it gives me clarity about what's going on, what's the biggest priority of the day.
Yeah, you can prioritize Yeah. And there's a lot of tools and techniques and stuff people use out there, but some of them I think are complicated and confusing. And this is very simple. Anyone should be able to use this. The thing that I like about it too is that it gets it out of your head. That stress, that worry. Oh, I don't want to forget this. I don't want to think about that, or I need to do that, or you're not looking at it in comparison to everything else. It allows you to do that. So it sounds like a smart technique. I want to thank you so much, Terry, for being a guest on Construction Dream Team. I think it's very, very interesting and important in these days to learn from all sorts of projects, and fast-paced projects seem to be more and more prevalent these days. And don't you think this is a great episode, everyone? Why don't you send this episode to everyone on your team so they can help you try to create your construction dream team? Dream teams don't just happen, they get built one step at a time. Construction Dream Team allows you to tap into the collective wisdom of the entire industry so you can accelerate your success. Why not send out this episode and let people help you? The more people you have, the more people helping, the faster you can build your construction dream team. We have just created a Construction Dream Team LinkedIn group. I know that millions of construction folks are out there on LinkedIn. It's really a perfect place for us to continue the dialogue that's happening here on Construction Dream Team, where we listen to people and now we can talk about it with each other. And also the guests from Construction Dream Team are going to join me, and we'll have times when we'll jump in and we'll be there to answer questions and to talk with everyone. So please go to cdtlinkedin.com, Construction Dream Team, cdtlinkedin.com, and you can get the link to join, or you can just go into LinkedIn and search for a group, join a group right on your profile, and join the Construction Dream Team LinkedIn group. Remember that this is a place for us to really get to know each other and to share our knowledge and ideas and share with one another so that we can have more and more dream teams out there working on projects. So Construction Dream Team drops every single Monday at 4 a.m. Pacific time. Please join me next week when I will interview another industry leader or expert about the people side of construction. Thank you so much for joining me today. I will catch you next time.